The bulk of the first two rounds of your fantasy drafts will be loaded with running backs. So the Rotoworld Football crew is here to dissect our running back rankings. Hayden, Pat, and Daigle. So let's start with our first tier, gentlemen. We have Christian McCaffrey 1, Saquon Barkley 2, Ezekiel Elliott 3, and Alvin Kamara 4. Since they make up the top 4 backs for us, we obviously love all 4 of them. And I hate to be negative, but I have to ask. Saquon Barkley finished last year as the running back 7 in fantasy points per game. Is there any hesitation that you might have drafting him this year, Daigle?
In my mind, no, because it was that high ankle sprain that hindered him throughout the first part of the year. But then he returned for the Giants' final 3 games and finishes the overall RB1 in that short span, averaging just over 6 yards per carry and tacking on 11.2 yards per target on 11 catches. So it's not enough to get over the hump, in my opinion, to topple Christian McCaffrey as the overall player in fantasy, but it is enough to keep him as the number 2 running back, at least for the second year in a row.
Yeah, I mean, we know the issue last year was the high ankle sprain. He just was not the same after that. And, he said after week 14 that the mental aspect had been far tougher than even the physical aspect. This was after it had carried on for weeks and weeks and weeks. But he said that night after a Monday night game that he finally felt like he was getting back to his old self. And then, as John said, finish the season on a tear. And, the Giants are so pot committed to Saquon Barkley as an every down player, almost a Christian McCaffrey level player in terms of snaps. So, injuries happen to running backs. It happened to Barkley last year, but no worry about that this year. And I think he's still the clear-cut RB2 overall.
He wasn't the only running back in this tier that had an injury last year. Alvin Kamara, we learned a couple of days ago that he also had knee issues on top of his ankle sprain. And before his ankle sprain, he was breaking a tackle on 0.32 plays every single time he touched the ball. And then afterwards, that dropped down to 0.14. So basically his efficiency dropped in half as an explosive playmaker. So he should be healthy this year moving forward. That's why he's in this first tier, probably the first 4 picks overall in fantasy drafts.
Yeah, if I can just stick up for myself for a second. 1, hosting is not easy. But 2, the reason I brought up Saquon is because those names after CMC and Zeke and Alvin Kamara, we have no questions about their offense, right? I mean, both are with Zeke and Kamara, absolutely not. I mean, I am totally in on the Cowboys and the Saints offenses in 2020. I'm not so sure from a team perspective or an offensive perspective that we can have that same level of optimism for Saquon Barkley. But when I say that, it goes back to everything, and I agree with everything that you all said. There's a reason why we all have him as our second highest rated running back this year. All right, let's move on over to the second tier, which is just completely massive. It goes from running back 5 to running back 14. And almost all of them certainly will be off the board in your drafts by the end of round 2. I do have questions about players that were at the opposite ends of fantasy points per game last year. And let's start with Joe Mixon. He finished last year as the running back 21 in fantasy points per game and half PPR scoring. So, Pat, why do we have him as the running back 7 this year?
It's because of the way he finished the season. I mean, after their bye week, their week 9 bye, the Bengals committed to Joe Mixon as the focal point of their offense, and he was just a different player. And it was too late for a lot of fantasy owners because the first half of the season, I mean, Joe Mixon was he was barely even an RB2. He was almost unstartable in some formats. But after the break, he averaged 124 yards from scrimmage, over 4.5 yards per carry, showed, he could put an offense on his back. I mean, it wasn't a good offense, but he held up to the workloads. He turned in productive weeks, in a not talented offense. Now, as we know, the Bengals offense is 2 or 3 times more talented than it was last season. So much better set up for success. And just the way he proved himself last year and finally kind of put the Joe Mixon every fantasy analyst has thought existed, he finally put that into reality. I think that it's a warranted optimism with Joe Mixon, and that he's not going to, be this huge bust to start the year again like he was last year, and that he is a safe top 6-7 back.
I thought his career high 313 touches were because the team was trying to just simply go home and they were just done with football. They were so bad. But OC Brian Callahan recently came out and said that was because they had reconstructed their offense. And that's the idea they want to use this season. And since they don't have Andy Dalton or Ryan Finley under center, this will be a more potent passing attack with that same approach, just giving it to Joe Mixon in his belly and letting him run wild. So that right there opens up his usage and tells us he's going to be a bell cow for this year.
So let's, again, reiterate that the top of this tier is Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, and then Joe Mixon. I actually want to look at the name that ends this tier for us at running back 14. That is Austin Eckler. Again, running back 14 for us, but Hayden, last year, he finished as the running back 6 overall in fantasy points per game and absolutely should finish with the most touches out of that Chargers backfield this year. So why, I'm not going to say we're discrediting him, but maybe we should give him a little bit more respect and move him up from that running back 14 spot.
Well, Josh, when we were at the combine, the coaching staff and the general manager both said that they want to use Austin Eckler in a tandem role, and that's probably because he's a little bit smaller on the running back scale and he needs a second back. The Chargers just didn't get him as a true second back, maybe Justin Jackson, maybe Joshua Kelly, but I think Austin Eckler's carries are probably going to go up. The issue why we have him down a little bit is, one, he's a negative regression candidate. He absolutely crushed in yards after the catch, and that is kind of a volatile stat, and he's going to be the guy that's probably going to be regressing a little bit more than you'd want to. And we're also worried about Tyrod Taylor. Is he the type of quarterback that's going to be targeting his running backs in the flats? I think Tyrod's probably more likely to scramble than Phillip Rivers was, and that could also hit Eckler in his receiving totals.
Having said that, Hayden and I still ranked him number 12 overall, making him an RB1 because we wanted a pass-catching running back in that spot and not someone like Josh Jacobs or the other running backs we debate about whose target totals aren't even close to what Eckler can see.
I'll just say, I mean, you guys have already hit on all the good points. But, I mean, this is someone, who, if you're going in on someone as an RB1, he's only reached 15 carries twice in his career. That is, kind of a dangerous bet. And as you guys said, I mean, Phillip Rivers is one of the premier running back check down artists in NFL history. And we probably obviously cannot expect that same level of commitment from Tyrod Taylor or Justin Herbert. And so that's a really, really huge wild card. And, Justin Jackson on very limited work, but one of the most explosive backups in the NFL, someone who I think is really going under the radar in summer fantasy drafts. So, I mean, the upside is self-evident, but yeah, there are serious question marks with Austin Eckler.
Before we exit this tier, I do want to bring up our running back 8 because he has climbed up draft boards, up fantasy drafts, maybe more than anyone else this offseason. And his name is Clyde Edwards-Laird, the rookie first-round pick for the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll maybe save that entire conversation for an Outliers video that I want to do, but because we're kind of split. I mean, it's drastic what this split is. Some of us have him as the running back 5 or running back 6. Others have him as the running back 12 or 15. To me, Hayden, what stands out with CEH is, 1, he's in the best offense in the NFL. And 2, he comes into the league with more passing game production than almost any other back that we've seen in recent years. I mean, he set the SEC record basically for catches from a running back in a single season since the year 2000. And I understand that, like, in previous years, we've seen LaShawn McCoy and Damian Williams and Darrell Williams thrown into this backfield. But to me, that's just because the Chiefs haven't had a talent quite like CEH in their backfield. And there's a reason why I have him ahead of someone like Derrick Henry and even Joe Mixon. And that's because with Derrick Henry, we know that CEH is almost certainly going to work in the passing game. And I would just rather bank on the Chiefs offense compared to the Bengals offense.
Yeah, certainly. And the reason why they drafted him is because they had the committee backfield, but it was a bunch of just average running backs. And they wanted to get somebody that's a true difference maker, somebody that's going to be actually breaking tackles when he gets these dump offs. And plus, I also think he's going to be talented enough between the tackles. He's a really stocky guy. He's a little bit smaller, but he's stocky. I think that he's going to be able to run between the tackles and gobble up a lot of these goal line opportunities. I mean, the upside is just insane in this offense. If he sneaks into a couple goal line touchdowns early on, we're going to be talking about somebody that's going to be a top 5 running back for the entire year.
All right, let's switch to tier 3.
I got to wait. It's this, if you're debating CEH versus Derrick Henry, and like you're going in on a signature skill, which is CEH's pass catching, and then why would you bet on that signature skill, which we haven't seen at the NFL level yet? And I had questioned CEH as a between the tackles NFL runner before I even knew where he'd be playing. It's just interesting to me that you would rather bet on his pass catching, his signature skill, which we have never seen at the NFL level, than Derrick Henry's signature skill, which we have seen in quite dramatic fashion over the past 2 years. And this seems like a bet that you're kind of like aching to lose. If you'd rather bet, because it's two very special skills, but one we have seen demonstrated over and over again in the NFL from Derrick Henry, and one where we really have no clue with CH how it'll translate, in an offseason where he had 0 live reps.
I have a long rebuttal, but I want to table it. This is going to be a tease for an Outliers show that we're going to do later on. Okay, let's switch on over.
I want to be on that show.
Okay.
I have more.
We all do.
Let's switch over to tier 3. Again, a large tier, running back 15 to running back 21. This group still has fantastic opportunity to dominate their backfield in touches, but it's littered with names that have had previously great seasons or are getting older or coming off injury. So, Dago, I'll turn to you first. Who has the best chance to rebound this season to find the fountain of youth of this group, or maybe even the fountain of health?
It is a hot button topic right now, but I still believe that it's Todd Gurley with the Falcons offense this year. It's common to cite Devontae Freeman's 59% snap rate and the 5 games that Ito Smith was healthy for last year and use that as a knock against Gurley's projected usage. But I would note Freeman still averaged 16.5 touches per game, nearly identical to the 17 that Gurley averaged with the Rams last year when he finished as the RB14 overall, and 6 targets per game, Freeman with the Falcons last year, which is nearly double what Gurley got in LA. So I know touchdowns are the most volatile of stats, but just moving from the Rams, who targeted their running backs the league's lowest rate last year, to the Falcons, which we can now easily project Gurley for 5 targets a game and red zone usage, even if this quote is true that he'll be limited throughout camp and that maybe the knee issues are lingering, he's still going to be a red zone threat. So it is scary to bet on that, but I still want to bet on that as opposed to Leonard Fournette or some of the other names we may discuss here.
This whole tier is intriguing, except for Johnson, except for maybe Leonard Fournette and maybe Chris Carson, just with the injury concern. I mean, I'm okay ending up with almost any of these guys on my fantasy team: Todd Gurley, James Conner, Melvin Gordon, David Johnson, even Le'Veon Bell, who I know Hayden is kind of dabbling and truthing lately. But for me, of this group, like of the best bounce back bet, Melvin Gordon might have the fewest question marks, and he's someone who's already used to being in a committee to only playing 60 to 70% of the snaps, and this won't really be any different for him. His setup, it will be different, and it's a less talented offense, but like this is not a new role for Melvin Gordon. And last year he never got going after the holdout, and that won't be an issue this year. And I'm not really ending up with Melvin Gordon on many teams, but when I look at this tier, he probably actually has the fewest question marks.
I love that shout, Pat, because Melvin Gordon is someone, like you said, just lacks question marks and has just seemed to be like the dream running back that John Elway has searched for. Like this team could have gone into this season with Phillip Lindsay as, I think, a solid producer if they wanted to, but he's just craved a big 2 or 3 down back that can also operate, as we've seen with Melvin Gordon, in the passing game. And you just don't pay that type of money for a running back not to see 65-70% of the work. So while I don't have
is that he's in a situation now where he is the better pass catcher. I mean, Melvin Gordon is a great pass catcher for a running back, but he wasn't even the best pass catcher in his own backfield. Now he is a better pass catcher than Phillip Lindsay. So maybe he'll actually sneakily get a bigger snap share than we're expecting.
And I was going to close by saying I might not have a lot of exposure to Melvin Gordon. I might not have a lot of shares of him this offseason because I kind of end up taking a lot of wide receivers where he's going in drafts. But I do I'm a big James Conner person as well, but I do really like Melvin Gordon's outlook for 2020 as well. Hey, I'm going to start.
Josh,
go ahead.
Real quick. I've done like 75 best ball drafts this year. Yesterday, I looked at ownership. I have drafted, out of all the running backs I've drafted from this tier, 1% of my running backs come from this tier. 1%. And it's just completely fading. And for the reasons you said, Calvin Ridley's on the board. DJ Moore's on the board. Odell Beckham's on the board. When you're drafting these guys, give me the wide receivers that have true upside rather than these old guys that we're hoping find some touchdowns randomly.
Let's jump to tier 4. This tier is mostly comprised of rookies or second-year players. This goes from running back 22 to running back 30. David Montgomery, Jonathan Taylor, Devin Singletary, Cam Akers, DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins. I mean, that makes up a ton of names of this group. Hayden, who grabs your attention the most?
Well, I think in this tier, you're not guaranteed workload. So I want to be attaching myself to some of the good offenses. So I think either of the Baltimore running backs are interesting. I think Mark Ingram's probably going to open the year up in a pretty decent sized role, probably being a weekly RB2. And then maybe later in the year, you get J.K. Dobbins kind of reversing, getting into the RB2 mix as well. Jonathan Taylor is also somebody who I think is going to earn work early, and that's a really good offense, surprisingly, a really strong offensive line. I think that they have a very easy schedule. So I think that maybe even like Raheem Mostert, if you can get him later, but just getting the good offenses in this tier.
Marlon Mack is a fine player, but he isn't a special one. And the Colts have basically shouted for the mountaintop that they're not going to be bringing him back in free agency next year. So is he in the way of Jonathan Taylor currently? Yes. But the Colts have the easiest schedule based on Vegas's projected win totals. So what that tells me is they'll be large favorites in numerous games. And garbage time carries for Jonathan Taylor, who profiles as Saquon Barkley with worse hands, is completely different and far superior than 14 garbage time carries for any other running back in the league. So I would imagine he forces his way onto the field. They play the Colts and the Jets in their first 3 games. Those second halves alone are how Taylor will showcase himself to the coaching staff and earn more reps after the first month.
I mean, we're spending a lot of time talking about Marlon Mack lately. I mean, the Colts drafted Jonathan Taylor because he's the better version of Marlon Mack. Like, he's the souped up Marlon Mack. So I'm not viewing Marlon Mack as like a big hindrance to Jonathan Taylor's rookie workloads. And this tier, I mean, Hayden hit up. There's a lot of like people who are kind of fun to bet on, but like, I feel like it probably is David Montgomery, even though he's not in a good offense. To have this kind of, to be going where he's going is barely an RB2, but have like a, unquestioned starters role with like zero competition whatsoever. That's hard to find at that part of the board. And so you don't have to love the player, but the situation is so good for David Montgomery.
Yeah, it's easy to see and predict that maybe the worst year of David Montgomery's career was his rookie season. I will also say, Daigle, you have been in the lab working on your elevator pitch for Jonathan Taylor, and I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it. All right. We have gone through our top 30 running backs. There's a lot left on the board. Almost certainly some of them that are left will impact fantasy seasons this year. Hayden, I'll turn to you first. Any other favorites we must mention before we get out of here?
Well, my highest owned player out of all positions is Chase Edmonds, and he's not somebody that you need to reach for. He's going to be in like the last round of your home league, your office league, and he has unmatched potential if Kenyon Drake ended up missing time. He's a very talented runner himself. I think he's also the clear-cut number 2 back in that offense. He doesn't provide any standalone value. That's something that Daigle has highlighted on Twitter, but he does offer top 8, top 10 upside for any week that Kenyon Drake misses. And I think that in the 15th, 16th rounds, compared to some of the other running backs are drafting, he's the guy that you want.
Pat?
I like to get Justin Jackson, even with the Joshua Kelly uncertainty. I think he's so explosive, and I think there could be carries there for the taking. I like to get Raquel Armstead. It's a little weird knowing how Jay Gruden might delineate the touches here, and we know like his teacher's pet, Chris Thompson's there. But I mean, the Jags, talk about signaling. They're out on Leonard Fournette, and I think there'll be a pretty short leash there this year. And Raquel Armstead, someone who is basically free in drafts. Yeah, I'm coming away with on almost every team.
Daigle, close us out.
Ronald Jones is someone we'll look back and wish we had drafted in the 4th round rather than letting him slip to the 6th if he does, in fact, handle third downs. And Bruce Arians' most recent comment saying that Jones is the guy suggests as much.
I am unreasonably high on Antonio Gibson. When
is this coming? This is kind of what I was wondering.
This is a player who now is in a Scott Turner offense, and I don't think play callers and Scott and his father Norv can just eliminate the facet of their game plan that allowed a running back to lead the position in targets over the last 3 years. That's not something that just disappears. And so someone like Antonio Gibson maybe has a little bit of a slow development in those first couple of years because we just do not have preseason games to know what it's going to be. But I could see some absolutely explosive weeks if he ends up getting that full-time workload. And around running back 34, where we have him, I personally have him as running back 32. It's not going to tank your draft if he doesn't hit that ceiling that we're talking about. All right, gentlemen, great job. If all of you out there want to check out our full rankings, outliers, selected scoring just for your league, half-point PPR drafts, everything, go and check out our season-long tools over at rotoworld.com/edge.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.